Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the altar with me, your host, Colby Martin. I feel like my mic is blowing out the sound a bit, gonna bring it down, or I just maybe should stop yelling so much. That's probably not gonna happen. So great that you are here with me today, whether it's afternoon, because you live where I-ish live, or whether it's evening, such as where Brooke is at, and from just outside London, watching on her TV. As soon as you put, Brooke, that icon of the TV, I just imagined you watching on like this old CRT, old school TV. I really want to imagine that that's what you're doing. Love that you're going to hang out with me today. I'm so excited to be back on the air. I've missed you. I've missed us. I've missed this time together. On today's show, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to talk a bit about just where I've been and ask where you've been as well. In case you missed it, I got a couple news things to share with you. I got a story for Reason to Hope. See if I can point. This is hard to do. I always tease my wife, make fun of my wife for not being able to point, but honestly, it's not as easy as it looks. Then I'm going to talk about perspective shift, what I've been writing about recently, and then we're going to end our show with a special guest, Pastor Josh Lee from Brooklyn, New York. All that and maybe a little bit more because you're here, and every time you're here, it makes for an exciting, special magic. Welcome to the altar. Let's get into it. So lovely to see all your names and icons. Like Meg's watching right now from her phone while door dashing before the snowstorm hits. That's good luck. I hope it's going to snow in Tulsa. I'm geographically challenged. Tulsa's in Oklahoma, correct? And y'all get snow there? This is why I like San Diego, people. I don't like the snow. Julie. Hi, Julie. I bet you get snow in Provo, Utah. Glad to have you with us here. Hi, Susan. So good to have you. Hi, Donna. It's good to see you, friend. Leah's coming in from California. What's up, Troy? So glad to have you here with us this afternoon. Melissa, hi. Howdy. Howdy from Texas. If you missed the opening question before the show began, it was, where are you watching from and on what device? I'm kind of curious how people are watching. So we have, I think, a lot of people on their phones, some on their computers. Brooke's watching on her TV. So I'm just curious how you're watching. I haven't been on air in a while. I think it's been like 6 weeks. It was like mid-December, I think, the last time I did an episode of The Altar. And then I took a couple weeks off because I knew I was going to for Christmas and for New Year, and it just shut the whole thing down, and had a glorious time being with my wife and my 4 kids as everybody was off school, and we took a few weeks off of work, and just so good. One of the newsworthy things in that time is that our household finally converted to a fake tree. So my wife and I, both born and raised in Oregon. And I think even though we moved away from Oregon back in 2007, spent like 5 years in Arizona before being here for, good gravy, 10 years now. I think it's now been 10 years. We've held on to that real tree part of us where Christmas trees are only real. That's the one that counts. And in the last couple of years, we had been, our commitment to that idea had slowly been buckling. It was bent but not broken, and then this year it finally broke as we have we got a tiny cat during the beginning of the pandemic, and his name is Gilbert, and he's a freaking terror, and we just could not keep up with the constant pine needles all over the floor and the ornaments all over the floor. So we finally said, let's just get a damn fake tree. Let's just do it. And we bought it. So we bought a real tree this year, and it was up for maybe a week. And then we just stuck it outside on the back patio, got a fake tree. And that's our new life now. Here we are. We are fake treers. Yeah, so that was the December break. And then I was planning to come back in January, and the coronavirus found us. Fun, I guess. But it shut down our whole family operation for like 2 weeks as we tried to figure out, like, on a daily basis, who was now positive. How could we isolate that person a little bit from the other people in the house? Who gets to go to school? What are the new policies for how you have to prove you can go to school? All the tests. At one point, when we first got our first positive in the house, I spent, over the course of 2 days, I spent 6 hours driving to 13 different stores around San Diego, just trying to find those at-home tests. They were just sold out everywhere. It was quite the disruption. I, like so many other people, or our whole family, like so many other people, are vaccinated and boosted and all that stuff. So it really, I mean, honestly, the Omicron variant is so mild. So that part of it was just there. It was more just kind of the way it disrupts life, for those of you who've had it, I think, and maybe it wasn't a real severe case, like, it's just a disruption, especially with kids in school. And so that delayed, my point is that delayed my getting back on air for January, as we were trying to just get through that time in our life. But we're here now. It's 2022. Happy New Year to everyone. I'm excited. I'm excited for a whole new year, a whole new slate of episodes of The Altar. I've slowly been working on the new studio here in the garage, and I'm getting real happy with sort of how I'm getting it dialed in with the different pops of color, and my favorite art piece of the Shire over there, which right here. So there's a lamp. Can you see this? There's a lamp right here with the light bulb, and I've got it bouncing off of the door of Bilbo's door. It looks a little bit to me like the light's like illuminating, like it reminds me just a wee bit of like Christian empty tomb art when that light is on. But it's not. It's Bilbo freaking Baggins, not the risen Lord. Okay, so that's where I've been. I'd love to see if you have a chance on your phone or on your computer, or those of you watching on your TV, if you have an ability to comment, where have you been for the last 6 weeks? What have you been up to? Tell me a highlight from your last 6 weeks, since we haven't gotten to hang out in a while. Tell me something good from your life. Okay. And while you're doing that, I want to share with you something in case you missed it. You must be blinded by the lights. On Monday, I was invited to Shannon Q's YouTube channel, and Shannon Q is she's an atheist. She grew up in the church and was a Christian for many years of her life, and then deconverted, as she describes it, and is now an atheist who hosts a lot of interesting conversations on her YouTube channel. And she found me through my conversations with Sean McDowell, the couple times I've been on his channel to talk about progressive Christianity and then to talk about LGBTQ topics. And so Shannon she was surprised that there was someone like myself out here advocating, a Christian pastor out here advocating for a different reading and understanding of the Bible and full inclusion of LGBTQ people. And so she invited me on her show, and there are some things we probably don't agree on. But there are many things I think that Shannon and I would find agreement on. And one of them is, I think, hopefully obvious, which is the value of full embrace and inclusion and rights for those who identify LGBTQ. So if you want to, her and I talked for like an hour and then took some questions from the live viewers, and I really had a great time on her channel. So you're welcome to go check that out. That's on the YouTubes. Just go and search for Shannon Q. And you can find that video on her channel. And then also, if you're not subscribed to the Kate and Colby Show, then go do that on your podcast platform of choice, as long as it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or Podbean. I don't know if we're on any others. But yeah, Kate and I, we've been doing this podcast for years, and we do these things called garage sessions, where just her and I sit down and put a couple mics out and chat like we used to do in the old days. And I say the old days because more recently we turned it into like a live talk show type of thing. And the episode that just dropped like a week or two ago, Kate and I get into a little bit of the zeitgeist conversation of the moment, which is all them evangelical folk who are suddenly hot and bothered about the topic of deconstruction and have all sorts of opinions on why people might be deconstructing. And so Kate and I wanted to talk about that over the course of a few episodes. And so the latest episode is Kate gets into a bit about how this idea of evangelicals telling you your why, like telling you why you're doing a thing and giving you the meaning for your story. This is part of why Kate and many people left evangelicalism anyway, because everything in your life gets shoved into this narrow view of, oh, this is happening for God's glory, or this is happening for some other reason or purpose, or just hang on and you'll see why, there's a reason for everything. And so we're always given the why. Here's why this thing is happening to you. And so then when, conservative thought leaders or pastors or whomever are now out there telling those of us who have left the faith or just altered the faith in some way, telling us why it is we're doing it, just feels real reminiscent of some of those older narratives that we were trapped in. So check that out, Kate and Colby Show. And then our next episode that we recorded a couple days ago should be out here shortly. And we continue the talking about this topic. All right. Let's get back to Oh no. Sorry. My scenes are out of order. I was just trying to come back to this so I can see you all here for a minute. I asked you to share something good from your life, and Donna, you bought a house? Freaking A. Is the A button? Does it clap? No. The A button used to clap. Well done, Donna. That's super exciting. Very happy for you. Very happy for you. Jesse's been binging Queer Eye episodes. Also going to clap for that. We got a symbolic symbol. Got to go to a great Lunar New Year's dinner with new friends. New friends. That's a really precious thing right now, isn't it? Friends and new friends. Which reminds me, BT Dubs, I just recently learned about the musician Ben Rector. I don't know where he's been all my life, but his music is fantastic. And he's got this song called Old Friends and a really beautiful music video. So go check that out. Ben Rector, Old Friends on YouTube. And wow, it's just a beautiful video and a beautiful song about the value of old friends, the people that we grew up with and that know us in ways that no one else does. Shane wants people to know that I'm on a few random obscure platforms, or our podcast is. Thanks, Shane. If anyone's going to know that, Shane, it's going to be you. Yeah. Melissa says thanks to me and Shannon Q. It sure makes a positive impact when people advocate for us. Yeah. And Julie says that was such a good conversation. I agree. So go check it out if you haven't yet. Hey, Iowa. Hi, Heather Hickerson. So glad you're here. How's Iowa doing? I don't know that that's a state I've been to, but don't take it personal. I haven't been to very many states. I'm not a very traveled person, is I think what is true. Hey, I'm going to talk about perspective shift for a minute. So Perspective Shift is a weekly newsletter that is hosted over on Substack and StubHub? No, not StubHub. Substack allows me to write and post these articles, and then they get delivered to anyone and everyone who subscribes. And it's totally free. So you just head to perspectiveshift.co and put in your email address. And then you'll start receiving these every Wednesday morning, my articles called Perspective Shift. And for the last month, you can see there on the screen, I've been doing a series where I've been reflecting on the phenomenon in which people who identify as Christian and who are affirming of LGBTQ people and yet they still attend or support or go to a church that is non-affirming. And in my first, in the first article, I wrote 5 reasons why people say that they stay in non-affirming churches. And you can go check that out. People say they stay for community and relationships. They say they stay because it's convenient and familiar. Like that's where I've always gone. It's what's close to my house. People say they're there to be a change maker, so that we can help move it towards inclusion. People say that they stay in their non-affirming churches to be a safe place for anyone who might be queer and in the community. And then people say they stay in non-affirming churches because, look, it's not perfect, I know, but like there's a whole bunch of other things that the church is good for. And so I give sort of my thoughts on those, and talk about kind of the validity. Like some of those I think make sense. Others I don't really back. And then the next article in the series, I talked about this word should, because I'm about to get into saying that I think people should leave their non-affirming churches. But this word should is a word that I have, in many ways eradicated from my vocabulary. Like I don't get into the should business, not near as often as I used to, that's for sure. Like back in the day when I thought all the answers to life were held in the Bible and all you had to do was just know the Bible, then you could just tell people what they should do all the time. And I did that. And now I'm way slower to tell people what I think they should do. But I think if the stakes are high enough, and this is what I talk about in the article, if the stakes are high enough, and if I know what your end goal is and you're trying to get somewhere, then I might say should. Like if the stakes are high enough, you should do this. And, or if this is your goal, then to get there, you should do this. Okay. That's the second article in the series. And then the third article came out last week, and this was specifically targeted at parents, parents who might be affirming themselves, but still attend a non-affirming church. And I actually created a video just for the parents out there, and I'm going to play that video for you now. It's only like 2 minutes long. So, and then I'll be right back. But this is the video that released 2 weeks ago. Hey parents, psst, come here for a sec. There's something I want to share with you. If you identify as a Christian, specifically one who affirms LGBTQ people, but you still attend a non-affirming church, I'd like you to consider the following. Let's say someday down the road, one of your children might share with you that they are queer. Now, since you're an open and affirming person, I'm assuming you'll celebrate this with your child, and that's great. But once the hugs are hugged and the appropriate flags and t-shirts ordered, eventually the question of church is going to hit the foreground. And when that does, many of you, I'm guessing, will make the difficult but necessary decision to part ways with a faith community that will not hold a wedding ceremony for your child, will never grant them a position of leadership in the church regardless of how talented or called they are, and will, at some point, preach a sermon that reminds you how they really feel about your beloved child. And so you will, I'm sure, choose your child over your church. And well, you should. That is the correct call to make, in my opinion. However, imagine this scenario instead. What if, instead of waiting until some future date when someone you love more than anything reveals to you that they are gay or lesbian, transgender, or some other sexual identity or orientation that your current church finds so incompatible with the family of God, what if, hang with me here, what if you left your church right now? Like today, right after watching this video. Think about it. Which is a better story? One where years from now, you eventually leave your non-affirming church because your child came out, but then that forces you to try and answer, so Mom, Dad, tell me again why you stayed in this church all those years. Remind me what was so important to you that you tolerated a theology that condemns me just for being me. Or maybe a story instead, where you bravely and boldly align your internal convictions with your external reality, even when there's no personal impetus to do so, thus ensuring that at any point down the road, your children know, without a doubt, that you truly are a safe person for them. One who doesn't just talk the talk, but walks it as well. In the end, ask yourself, do you want your kids to know that if they are queer, that you will love and accept and embrace and celebrate them? Or do you want them wondering in the back of their mind why it is that you say you would love and support them if they ever came out, all the while watching as you tithe, volunteer, and support a church that very much would not? Yeah. So that video is currently on my YouTube channel and also my Facebook page. So if you want to watch it again or want to share it, even more so, you're more than welcome to do that. But that was my attempt to try and articulate that. I know families who the parents themselves are affirming, and yet they attend non-affirming churches and they have kids. And I feel really confident that if at some point down the road, one of their kids comes out as queer, then they'll be like, okay, you know what? We should probably find a different church. And as I said in that video, I just think that they should make that decision now. I get why are you waiting to move or to leave your church? Do it now. Okay. So that was my special message to parents. And then going back to, the article that went out this morning and has been circulating the interwebs is now 5 reasons why I think that you should leave your church if it's not affirming. And you can go to perspectiveshift.co to read this article and read all the past ones and subscribe if you'd like. And yeah, I'm not going to get all the way into this, but the 5 reasons that I offer is number 1, I think this is a justice issue. Like, I think it's wrong to discriminate against queer people. I think it's wrong to say that it's a sin to be gay. I think it's wrong to use the Bible to justify any sort of oppressive or discriminatory theological position. I think that's wrong. And so I think to deny LGBTQ people membership or to deny them leadership in the church, I think is a justice issue. And so then to go to a church that participates in that injustice, I think is not the right move. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, I think you should leave, is lukewarm complicity is bewildering. And I quote here from, hopefully not like in inappropriate ways, but hopefully in ways that are honoring to the author, from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail that talks about, in that letter, he says, the white moderate is more devoted to order than to justice. The white moderate prefers a negative peace, which is to say it's the absence of tension, as opposed to positive peace, which is the presence of justice. And according to MLK, the white moderate is just as detrimental to the cause of civil rights as like the extreme KKK. And I think that is not I think there's a similar parallel to those who sort of stay in the sort of complicit attendance of a non-affirming church. And I think that is bewildering that you would sort of choose kind of just not rock the boat, not say anything, not disrupt, and just sort of be. Reason number 3, I mean, I think that the LGBTQ people in your life are watching, are observing you live your life. And they might hear you say Friday night over dinner that, you know, how much they love you and support you and all that, but then continue to be like, okay, but like, why are you still going to that church? So, you know, actions speak louder than words. You know this. Reason number 4, churches need to feel the pinch. I think my point here is until like hits a critical mass point of people who are willing to kind of abandon these churches with this toxic theology, then maybe there isn't great incentives for church leaders and other leadership people to really reckon with this matter. For many people, they say it's a theological issue. For many conservatives, they say it's theological. But I think that financial incentives is just as much a motivator for people to remain entrenched in their theology. In fact, many pastors themselves, and I know some personally, many pastors themselves are affirming, but they ain't saying it. They ain't telling nobody because they know that it will disrupt their paycheck. And then reason number 5 is kind of like a pot, like there's so much good work to be done outside of the conservative evangelical system. Come on out here. Like people, we got good, holy work to do. And to quote Jesus, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So leave those churches and come on out. All right. So anyway, that's all over at perspectiveshift.co. And I invite you to go check that out if you want. And that leads us then into the guest that we have today, because I want to talk with him about this. I'm curious what he thinks. He has a story that I want him to share from something that he did back in December. And I want to talk about that story. And then I want to kind of pick his brain because he's also a progressive Christian pastor. He himself is gay. And so I wonder, like, where does he sort of land on this topic of affirming Christians attending non-affirming churches. So without any further ado, let's welcome our guest, Pastor Josh Lee. There he is. Hi, Josh.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. Where are you? Somewhere on the East Coast?
Oh yeah, it's 5:30 here. It's dark outside.
That's awesome. Hey, buddy, it's good to, you know what? We have met like in large group Zoom chats, but correct me if I'm wrong, we've never done this. We've never
Yes,
okay.
that's right.
All
Never
right.
one-on-one, just in the large group launchpad sort of movement.
So we may not like each other. Who
Well,
knows
we'll
how this
find
will
out about
go?
that real quick, I bet.
Let's see. We didn't do any like tech check-in. So if anything goes wrong, people with audio or video, then just hang tight and we'll get it sorted out. And I'm just gonna adjust your camera just a little bit, just to brighten you up a hair. All right.
I
So
appreciate that. I was just thinking I look really, really pale and weird.
you are where it's cold and snowy. So pale and weird, I
That's
think, is par for the course for y'all this
that's
time of
pretty
year, isn't
normal.
it? All right, Josh, I got some things I want to talk to you about. But the first is you write on, I think it's your Facebook profile, you write that you're an Enneagram type 3,
Yes,
which is
this is true.
also my type as well. And I'm wondering, what is your favorite thing about being a type 3? Because we could probably talk
Hmm.
for like ages about the shadow side, like the embarrassing shadow, like stuff that makes you throw up in your mouth, parts about being a 3. But like, what do you like about your Enneagram type?
That's a good question. I feel like I always focus on the negative, so
Right?
I'm
I
not even
know.
sure if I have. I'm not even sure if I have the thing that I would be like, "Oh, that's really positive. I love that about me." But I guess I always try to take the negative and also try to view it as something positive. So I find a lot of my self worth in what other people say about me, and so obviously that's something that we beat ourselves up about on our
Yeah.
shadow side, that we put
Yeah.
so much weight in that. But I think I'm trying to learn to actually also really value that. Um, and I think the reason I try to do that is because I think a lot of people don't really care what other people think about them. And that's kind of a downside sometimes too, right? Because no
Mm,
matter how often somebody says like, I love you, or I care about you, or I think that you're really, really good at this, like that's not good enough for certain people. But for me, those words actually do something for me, and that's a gift. And so being able to value that, I think is just something I really love about my Enneagram number.
I like it. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you this, and I hope I don't embarrass you too bad. But one of the things I love about type 3 is, uh, uh, yes, vanity can get in the way, and yes, overly concerned with how we look and appear, absolutely can and maybe is more often than not a downside. And yet, I also really enjoy nice clothes and I enjoy grooming and I enjoy like sort of style and all that. And you have a picture on your Facebooks of your closet.
Oh
And
boy. Oh wow.
and
There it
I
is.
don't know how current this is. I don't know if this represents what it looks like right now, but Josh, what I really was looking for, and I think it was a story maybe, but you did a part where you pulled out the drawers of your socks and you have
Yes,
like
it's a
80
TikTok.
million maybe not 80 million, maybe 70 million pairs of socks, all like color corded. Anyway, Josh, I'm really
Yes.
impressed with your fashion and your organization. And you got some strong type 1 in you because damn, that's some serious organizing right there.
Yes, that's so real. You really just outed me. I love that in so many ways. So many euphemisms there.
I mean, look at the little tray of glasses, all the different colors of glasses. So this is a type 3. This is someone who cares about how they look. And
Yes.
yes, that has a dark side, but I think it also has a really
Yes.
cool
And my
side.
fiance, his stack are those other two off to the right there that are not color coordinated. So, and he has a small section of coats over there, but that's about
A
all his clothes
small section of coats. Oh, this is fantastic. All right. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. We're off to a good start. Okay. Josh, before we get into the main topic that I wanted to talk with you about, which is this tension of Christians who themselves are affirming but attend non-affirming churches. Um,
are.
give give our viewers, both watching now live and going to watch this back later, give us a little window into your line of work and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I actually just moved to Brooklyn to serve as a co-pastor at Forefront Church. And so before that, I was in Peoria, Illinois, pastoring an interdenominational church there as well for the last 3 years. So those are really two spaces that I've really felt finally at home in my work in ministry because of the fact that they're interdenominational. It's a conglomerate of people from all Christian traditions and backgrounds. And I'm a spiritual mutt and a spiritual refugee that kind of has just kind of bounced around and gone to different churches and places and spaces that would take me. And so to be a part of a community of faith where it's really just a large refugee gathering of people who've been, kicked out of churches is a gift to be amongst caring for and being cared by folks like that.
Yeah. And so how long have you been doing ministry in this way?
I became more progressive and came out when I was 25. I came out in waves, as a lot of queer people do. I first came out to my mom when I was in high school and did reparative therapy 3 different times with 3 different organizations, and then went to Moody Bible Institute and did my undergrad. And when I was at Moody, I learned through a professor there that another response to homosexuality was lifelong singleness and celibacy. And so, hearing that freshman year of college, I'm like, that sounds amazing compared to like having to try to change my sexuality. At least I can admit I'm gay and just not act on it.
Yeah.
So I did that for 5 years. And while I was pastoring a church in Kentucky after undergrad, I really went on a long journey of reconciling my faith and sexuality. Thanks to Facebook and its infinite wisdom, it just happened to put a link on my news feed that talked about gay affirming churches. And so I clicked the heresy and sort of went down that rabbit hole of learning about gay affirming churches. And that's really what the first time I'd ever heard about that when I was 24. And started a journey then of being in more progressive churches, Methodist, United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, and went back to school and got my master's. And then after my master's, moved, like I said earlier, to Peoria to pastor my first interdenominational church. And I'm ordained in the United Church of Christ. They embraced me after the Independent Baptist rejected me and stripped me of my credentials once I came out as affirming. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So wow, I didn't know that about you, that you spent time in the gay conversion reparative therapy world.
I did, yes.
I'm glad it didn't work.
You and me both. I love how queer I am. I mean, I would not have the closet I did if I was able
No, you would not.
All those colors? No way. It would just be blacks and browns and grays.
Or you might have the closet, but you wouldn't take a picture of it and share it with anybody because it would be a little too revealing.
Yeah, a little bit. Just a little bit.
So you did that and that didn't work. So then you said you spent 5 years trying to make the celibacy thing work.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And I was faithful to that for 5 years. I really was celibate. I mean, some people say, oh, I did celibacy for 5 years, but I really didn't have sex for 5 years.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough 5 years. But I think it was hardest the last 2 because I began to realize that my sexuality wasn't just about sex.
Yeah.
It was about love.
Yeah.
And once my friends started getting married and people started having kids, that's when I began to realize, oh, I'm jealous. And why am I jealous? That's so weird because gay marriage wasn't legal at the time. So that wasn't a framework that I had in my mind. And so that was really what did a huge shift for me to begin to realize, oh, this is more than just about sex. Like I had been told my whole life in evangelicalism, like this is really about love and companionship as well. And that really kind of really started my journey to ask, well, then is that a sin? And I think we all know where I landed.
Yeah. Tell me then what's it like for you now to interact with, converse with, or even think about queer Christians who do, to use the vernacular of the community, do opt for that side B way of living, which is to say, and correct me if I'm not describing it right, but I believe it is, to say that you would accept that you are a gay person, a lesbian, that you accept that. You're like, just being that is not in and of itself inherently wrong. Like I am not an abomination to God just for being who I am. And yet the conviction is that God's only design for the type of intimacy that you described is between man and woman. therefore, like my choice is to remain just single and celibate. Um, I wonder how do you feel about those who choose that now, or who have that in some ways chosen for them, which is kind of the sad part about it, right?
Yeah, forced celibacy is a hard thing. If I think there are people in our world that choose to be celibate on their own accord, but I think forced celibacy, basically what you just laid out, of you have to be celibate because it's a sin to do anything other than that, unless it's with a woman. It's hard. I think the feelings I have now when I meet people like that is a lot of sympathy, and probably in a way that maybe is like maybe not healthy. Like I just feel bad for them.
Yeah.
And I think I've met people just recently, met somebody here in New York who identifies as side B, and he claimed to be very happy and at peace with his life, and he didn't sense that he had any feelings negative towards God for it. I don't understand that. I can't fully wrap my mind around it. I trust that that's where he's at, and he wasn't just describing that. But my feelings are always just a heavy heart because, I remember the feelings of great despair and anguish and sadness at the thought, really, of potentially falling in love with someone and maybe having to let that go if that happened on accident. Because if I didn't, I'd go to hell. And living in that constant state of anxiety and fear, and never really allowing myself to be close to any men for the fear that they might come out to me one day and I'll have already been too close to them and they'll get wrapped up in this sort of emotional entanglement that I won't be able to get out of. You really begin to build some strong walls that you don't really allow anybody in, because you don't really ever allow anybody to fully know you. And if you don't ever allow anyone to fully know you, then you never really feel fully loved.
No,
Because there's always the thing in the back of your head that says, well, if they knew this or I shared this with them,
that's right.
maybe then they wouldn't love me.
Yeah.
And that's a hard place to live.
Yeah. I think, thank you for sharing that, Josh. I think you're going to be all Christianese for a minute. Your testimony in what you just shared there is so vital in this particular space for many reasons, but the main one that's coming up for me right now is when I do a lot of the conversations and the work that I do, whether it's dialogue. I mentioned earlier my conversations with Sean McDowell, like, right, this sort of well known evangelical apologist, and there guys like him, people like him, very much would be of the opinion that, okay, yeah, you're gay, maybe you're born that way, or maybe it's some sort of mysterious cocktail of nature and nurture. That's fine, but you like celibacy is your only path in life if what you want to do is honor God. Um, you know, when it feels appropriate to respond to that, I want to respond with, because they'll often bring up the examples, right? The
Mm.
who is it? The Jackie Lee Hill, is that her name? Or Perry or Wesley? Like there's these sort of examples of Christians that are heralded by the evangelical crowd because look, they chose celibacy and they look how great they're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me, Josh, to not be incredibly skeptical of that on one
Sure.
hand. On another hand, part of me is like, well, isn't it also possible that the person who is saying that they have really managed to live a heterosexual life with another person is also maybe somewhere in the middle of, like, they might have
Yes.
some bisexuality, so they can
Mm.
find a type of intimacy and a type of closeness with someone of the opposite sex, which is not the same situation for someone like yourself who is much farther down the scale. Like, look, I couldn't have that sort of intimacy with a woman. So I have all this sort of skepticism, but I don't always feel like it's appropriate for me to say that in those situations, to be like, well,
Mm.
I doubt that person's really happy in their celibacy. Um, so anyway, I appreciate your testimony
Mm.
of sharing, like, I did it for 5 years and ultimately, like, it's not a sustainable
Yeah.
life, or at least not if your goal is sort of wholeness and well-being and flourishing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, and I love how you named, without knowing me that well, that I'm really far on the gay spectrum, because I did date a girl one time,
Okay.
and she kissed me and I threw up right there. I realized then, like, oh
Unbelievable.
wow, I really can't stomach this. Like, I'm really that gay. And so I knew that I wasn't ever going to try to put another woman through, that feeling. Uh, because I mean, it's all fun and games, but
Yeah,
we later had a conversation where she was like, "You don't look at me the way I look at you."
totally.
And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I look at you with so much love and adoration, and you just look at me like I'm a friend." And I realized that, that this was not fair to her.
Yeah,
That even if I could learn to be content, she didn't have to be. She could have so much more. And how dare I put her through that just so I didn't have to be alone?
yeah. Oof. Well said. Okay, Josh. Like I said earlier in the show, I have been writing about for a couple weeks now the topic of Christians who themselves are affirming of
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ people and yet attend still a church that is not affirming. And I've had a journey with this particular topic. Like maybe a couple years ago I would have been just real hardcore full stop like no, like don't ever do it. It's totally wrong. And I've softened a bit on that position over the years because I've heard from individuals um, sort of why they stay, and I some of it makes sense to me, and my heart especially goes out to um, those who themselves are queer and they stay in a church maybe to keep a type of peace with their family system,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe because all they've ever known in life is a sort of like crumbs from the table, and for like who am I to tell them it's crumbs, right? Like
Sure.
I maybe if I'm in a deep relationship with them I could cast a vision for what a full like slice of warm buttery bread is like it really is better than crumbs, but that's not always our role to tell other people like no, you're just settling for crumbs. So anyway, I've softened a bit on that position, and yet I still believe, like, I don't know, is it 9 times out of 10, I don't know what the context is, but that like you should leave the non-affirming church. I saw a couple weeks ago, so this was in the Christmas time, you shared an experience on your Facebook about attending a service at Willow Creek. And I was so intrigued by that. So, can you first tell us the context of what we're looking at here on the screen? What is this story? And then I want to talk more with it about you, more about it
Sure.
with you. Yeah.
Yes, sure. So I attended Willow Creek on Saturday nights throughout high school and in my early 20s when I was at Moody Bible Institute. I would go on Saturdays because I was often preaching or on staff at a church, or I did something volunteer wise at the church, my childhood church, or a church I was on staff at throughout college. And so Saturday nights would just be a night when I could just go to church and I didn't have to be a pastor. I could blend in. No one knew me. No one was going to talk to me. I could go into a big mega church, sit down, and leave. And it was wonderful. And so I would go there for a long time. And in high school, I mentioned earlier that I went through 3 different reparative therapy programs. And this was one of the programs I went through. Exodus used to have one of their Exodus International Reparative Therapy program that's now shut down and apologized for the pain they've caused. They used to have one of their classes here and their groups. And so I would attend reparative therapy here for a time. It's actually kind of unfortunate how it all unfolded in the end. When I first started attending, they never asked me how old I was, and they assumed that I was an adult, but I was only 17.
Oh, wow.
And I don't really understand why they do this for reparative therapy camps, but they had a weekend retreat at a campground, basically, where there's cabins and so forth. And I've never understood why you would gather a bunch of gay people together for a weekend retreat away and break them up by genders into cabins, lesbians in one place and gays in the other. Never understood that. Very confusing. But I went for this weekend retreat, and it was the first night of the retreat, and we were in a small group, and I was talking about something about high school, and somebody put it all together and said, "How old are you?" And I
Mm,
told them 17, and then all of a sudden they're like, "You need to leave now. Like you can't be here." And so I left that program after having been a part of it for about 4 months, going on during the week to their weekly programs. Um, and I hadn't really kept in touch with their programs and the reparative therapy things when I was in college, but I would still go on Sundays, on Saturday nights. And honestly, whenever I was there, I would always look around this huge picture you see of the sanctuary, and I would see all these families
yeah.
worshiping and people holding the hands of their loved ones. And I went to these services by myself, And I would stand in that room, and I would, particularly on Christmas Eve services, they would have everybody turn to the people around them and express words of love and gratitude and how thankful they were to be in each other's lives during the Silent Night song at the end of the service. And at Christmas Eve service every year, just about, I would feel this deep sense of sadness because all these people had folks they could turn to and share this exchange with. And I thought, I'll never get to have that on Christmas Eve with my family, because I'm single and celibate at that time. So I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of deep work. I've done a lot of reconstruction. I heard you talking about deconstruction earlier, and I've decided that I really wanted to go back to the place where great trauma had been caused to me
Mm,
and reclaim the space and my memories and my control over it when I felt the control had been taken from me when I was there before. When I was just subject to whatever I believe the pastors would say to do. I mean, obviously, I could have walked away at any point,
yeah.
but as you know, in a lot of evangelicalism, there's so much adoration for pastors and clergy, and I was 17 as well, so there was some levels of doing what my family expected and wanted as well. And so, being able to just go back in the space and worship there with my fiance, to hold hands through the whole service, and to know that there were a few people looking and glancing and probably had their thoughts, and to go, you know what, I really don't care. I'm going to do what I want, and if you want to say something, great. It'll be an opportunity for us to have a really nice conversation, or not so nice. And it was just a really reclaiming space. And then at Silent Night, to be able to turn to one another
Yeah.
and to say,
Wow.
I love you, and I'm so grateful that despite my experiences in this church, that I've still found you, and I get to share my life with you, and to be able to sing Silent Night, a beautiful song, and to redeem it, have it not bring back negative memories whenever I
Mm,
hear it sung, but to be able to bring back this sweet memory, to reclaim the space, the memory, the song, um, was really redeeming for me.
it's really beautiful.
Mm.
That's really beautiful. Did you think that's what would happen? What were your instincts telling you when you made this decision to go? And tell me your fiance's name.
It's Austin.
And how much was Austin on board with this plan?
Well, Austin is agnostic. So that throws another curveball, because Austin had never been to a megachurch his whole life because he didn't grow up in the church.
Wow.
And, his experiences of megachurches is like Righteous Gemstone. If you've
Sure.
seen that, if you've
Yeah. Yeah.
seen that show, or like Tammy Faye Baker, her documentary that recently came out, or whatever, the film about her. So, his experiences of megachurches was very interesting. So I wanted him to be able to also experience what it was like to be a part of a megachurch. And I don't think he really grasped or understood like how much this experience meant to me.
Hmm.
But I know that he has always been someone, even though he identifies as agnostic, he still always comes to church and supports the work that we do. And because we share the same worldview, we may come to it through different means, but at the end of the day, we arrive at the same worldview.
Yeah.
There's a beauty there that we can share that I'm really grateful for. But it's also really interesting just to hear his impressions and ideas of like what he
Totally.
thought about this.
That.
This performance is how he experienced it,
Yeah.
and to understand what I was experiencing and what that meant to me, and to be able to take him back to the place of pain and say, this is where this happened,
Yeah.
and this is where I felt this,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful for you, because it heals these parts of myself that I wasn't sure would ever really be healed.
Yeah. I love that story for so many reasons. One of them is that it for me is one more example of this phenomenon that we've experienced at our church a lot in the 8 years that we've been doing our church, which is that not all the times, this isn't true for all the times. And so I don't counsel everybody in this direction, but oftentimes individuals will come to a church like Sojourn and they will sort of be triggered and be activated by
Mhm.
the songs and just the rhythm of the whole thing, the building, whatever it is. Like it brings up for very good reason all the pain points of the trauma from their past. And yet it Sojourn is a loving, it is a non-judgmental, is a church that is fully open and affirming and inclusive and welcoming. And so to be able to have all those sort of things be reactivated and be
Mhm.
triggered in you, and yet have a safe space in which your brain can start assigning new emotions to those experiences, is where some of the healing begins to happen. And now suddenly you
Yes.
become less activated over time by these things, because your brain's like, no, you're safe, you're okay. These things they can't hurt you anymore. You're okay. Um, so I love that this story for you sounds to me like, because of some of the healing that you've done, you could go back to a space like this. And
Mhm.
did you notice, were you activated at all? Did you notice anything happening in your body? Like, was there times where you were like, I think I made it 20 minutes. That's good. Now I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Or did you feel like, no, I'm okay. Like, what, tell me kind of how that was like for you.
Yeah. I would say if I had gone back there 3 years ago, there would have been some triggers. It would have been hard, but I think I've done enough work that I'll give you this illustration. I used this in a sermon once. If you've ever played Jenga, you got this sort of long tower that somebody puts together, and we all start poking at it. And basically, the idea here in my mind is that think about the tower like a construction of beliefs that somebody's decided in your childhood that they wanted you to grow up to be like XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Parents and teachers and TV shows and just sort of all of the things you take in around you. They had an idea as they were raising you. They wanted you to turn out as a certain construction. And eventually, though, in middle high school or college or midway through your life at some point, or maybe after divorce, people sort of poking at the blocks of that tower that you've been constructed of in your beliefs. They may start asking questions like, maybe women are equal to men. Perhaps our ideas of sexuality is not what we thought. Maybe the Bible, it has some mistakes. Maybe the Bible was put together with mistakes on purpose. Whatever it may be, and people poke at that. And there's some people that when their beliefs of their Jenga tower get poked, they're like, okay, back off. I don't want to play. I don't want to do this anymore. Leave me alone. And there's other people who are like, okay, I love this. This is exciting. Let's keep doing this. And I think for some people, eventually, if you keep poking at that tower, and the tower falls, and a lot of people find themselves, with this sort of rubble of all the Jenga blocks around them. And unfortunately, I think who really wants to play Jenga after a second round, right? Because you don't want to rebuild the tower again.
Yeah.
It's like so boring.
It's so
But
true.
there are a lot of times you'll replay if the group all agrees to rebuild the tower together, right? So somebody else
Mm,
rebuilds the tower for you,
mm,
or you'll agree to pull. You're just kind of just sit and look at the rubble, and you really begin to realize, I'll look and I can define what I don't believe, but I have no idea how to define what I do believe anymore. You look at the blocks and you can say, I don't believe that, and I don't believe that, and I don't believe that, but you just sit in it. And then I always say there's a third group of people who really are willing to do the work of reconstruction, and not just the reconstruction that someone else puts something back together for you, but you personally. And I don't think that necessarily means you reconstruct a tower, because I think if you reconstruct another tower, then it's just as much vulnerable to falling over again and being poked, and you finding yourselves at this sort of deconstructed place again. But instead, I think you take the blocks and you build a path with it,
mm.
a path in which just enough blocks that you can stand on and that you can take the next steps on your journey. And the other blocks, they're still there. You may never step on them again, but they're still a part of the path. They're still a part of the journey. And you may even take blocks that you haven't stepped on in 20 years, and 30 years from now, you may say, we're going to move this block up here to this part of the path. I'm going to walk on that again. I'm glad I was taught that back then, and it means something to me now.
Wow.
But I think the beauty of my experience at Willow was that there are certain things that it took me a long time to appreciate again, because there were certain songs that were triggered. There was certain, okay, someone's playing the piano behind the pastor at the end. They're getting ready to spiritually manipulate me. It may be the way they talk about money. It may be the way they talk about salvation that I get triggered, right? But I think my timing of going to Willow, while there were certain things that might have triggered me, like anything about ransom atonement theory, at the end of the day, I had done enough work on my journey that I could come along, that I felt stable, I felt grounded, that I could go, I remember when the pastor used to say that. That was a thing back then. I really appreciated that. I needed that in that time.
Mm.
But now I'm on a different block on my journey.
What a cool image I just put on the screen. Julie Middleton said that she loved that image of a path instead
Mm.
of a tower. I've also used Jenga in the past as an illustration of the process of kind of shifting from our old theologies. But I've never done that move with it. And I like that. And
Mm.
if I ever use that, I will attribute it to you at least the first time that I use it. And then it'll be like, well, as I often say, but
And then, as I always
yeah,
say,
that's right. Okay. So tell me then what comes up for you, because you weren't, correct me if I'm wrong, you weren't attending Willow as like a part of, that's going to be like one of your churches that you attend and worship at, right? I mean, you have
right.
your own, obviously you have your own church that you serve at and work at. So this wasn't for you saying like, yes, I want to now be a part of the community of Willow. I've healed from those things and now I see value in being a part of that. That wasn't what was going on for you. It was something else that you just shared in beautiful detail with us. So now let's turn to the topic of those individuals who I'm sure many are at Willow. As big as that church is, there has
Yes.
bound to be multiple people who themselves are like, yeah, I'm totes cool with the gays. Like, I think it's all good, and yet they still attend and support and serve at a church like Willow. What is kind of your thoughts on your positions when people come to you and pose the question like, should I leave my non-affirming church or what?
Yeah, I think I would. You phrased it excellent earlier when you said that you can't really give people that advice unless you know what the end goal or the hope for them is, right? Like, why are they trying to do that? So I would ask, like, by leaving, what are you hoping for, and by
Mm,
staying, what are you hoping for? And there may be questions on both sides. You may have answers for both of those, and determining then that those reasons, I think I would advise people accordingly. In the only ways I would really encourage someone to stay
yeah,
is if you and I are points of privilege in that we live in bigger cities where there are progressive
that's right.
churches,
Yeah.
and there are somebody commented on here. I don't remember who it was, but she basically said that, what do I do? We don't have a progressive church around us, and I
Mm,
and I don't want to just do online. We really need community. And I think in those instances, I understand you want to find some sense of community that you have. Maybe you have a few people in the church that share that view with you, and that's your small group and your sort of inner circle church within the church, and you can push and you can press. If you have children, as you wrote another article, and you need to think about people just beyond yourself, I would say that you need to give your children the choice if they want to go to that church or not,
mm,
long before they're in middle school or high school. Helping them understand what things mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad agree with, about the church, and that there are certain things that you don't agree with, and that it's okay to disagree with the church. I think that's really important. And I think then also to expose your family as well, if you have children, to online churches or gatherings like Queer Christian Fellowship, where they can be around in spaces like Queer Christian Fellowship. They have a yearly conference, and they have gatherings for parents that are specifically tailored towards people who oftentimes come from places and parts of the world and country that don't have affirming people to gather around. And so to be able to expose yourself as well as your family to other affirming people, I think is important, because if you're only
mm,
exposing yourself to those
yeah.
spaces, I don't think you're helping anyone.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And that's part of where I want to go with the series either next week or in 2 weeks is, okay, so maybe you, maybe you're going to stay in the church. So
Sure.
here's some other things to think about. So I love that you just shared, like, make an effort to be in other spaces. And I
Yep.
would even add to that, um, if you're tithing to your church, or if you're financially supporting your church, consider either redirecting that to another organization or maybe splitting that and saying, okay, I'll keep supporting this church that I've been a part of for years, but I'm also going to, from a place of desiring integrity in this area, I'm going to support Forefront in Brooklyn or Sojourn Grace in San Diego or some other organization. So I think there are things that people can do if they feel like, I really, this really is the community that I need to be at right now, or I feel like
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be at, or I don't really have any other option. I feel like there are things that can be done on top of that decision that might be able to maybe help that person find within them a more sense of balance. If they are feeling guilty for staying, and maybe they're not feeling guilty, maybe they're fine with it. And if they're fine with it, that's when I returned to some of the things I said in my article today, where like, I don't know that you should be fine. Like if you're going to
Right.
stay, okay, but don't be fine with it. Cause like,
Yes.
this is a serious issue. This is a serious matter here. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So have you run into people sort of telling you like, well, I'm staying there because I want to be a part of changing it. Like I feel like I've got the pastor's ear, or I've been able to get a book study going. Um, have you had people that have sort of shared that with you, like, oh, I'm staying because I want to be the change? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I have. And I'll also say in regards to, the giving of financial funds, I think that's really important to think about how we spend our money, not just in the church, but any institution that we give our monies to, for even just for products that we would consume. But I would say particularly if you're going to a church that isn't affirming, and you're going to give money to a church that is affirming and to the church that isn't affirming, um, you don't have to give it to the general fund. Give it to a ministry in the church that you really specifically are
Mm,
passionate about and
I
that
like
you
that.
care about.
Yeah.
And churches will take money no matter what. So don't worry, don't they're not going to reject your gift to give it to the specific pantry or specific ministry for, homeless youth or whatever it may be. But instead of giving your money to the institution, give your money to a specific ministry
That's
and
good.
make it
That's
known to the
good.
leadership.
Yeah.
Say, I'm not giving to the general fund because of XYZ about LGBTQ status, but I still believe in the mission of this church overall, and I believe in this ministry, and so I'm going to give to this. Because if you're not giving, it's likely that the leadership will go, this person's not really invested. They don't really care about this church.
Yeah.
They don't have any stock in this to
Yeah.
speak into it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah.
The other thing, to answer your question then, in regards to people who want to stay to change the church, I always ask people, well, let's figure out where is, just like sexuality is on a spectrum that we talked about earlier, where is your church on the spectrum? So I always say, is your church affirming? I mean, accepting, meaning gay people can sit in the pews, they can come on a Sunday morning, they can even join the janitorial staff if they wanted. Or is your church affirming in that your church says there is absolutely nothing wrong with homosexuality? We would do their wedding. They are welcome to be involved in any forms of leadership in the life of the church. Or is your church celebrating? Is your church potentially have a flag out front, or do they acknowledge Pride Month in any way? Is it normal for your pastor to use sermon illustrations that aren't just about centering straight couples but also gay couples? Does your church celebrate the life and experiences of LGBTQ people by maybe even going to a pride festival of some sort, or have P flag in the meeting in their building, whatever it may be? Where are they on that spectrum? And
That's
once
good.
we can locate where they are, then I kind of help them figure out how much energy do you have left
Yeah.
to bring them to the next stage. Because if
Yeah.
you don't have the energy to bring them from accepting to affirming, or affirming to celebrating, then what's your long-term game plan? Where can you bring them? Because you need to know at which point you need to leave before you get burned out and you just hate the church yourself,
Yeah.
or you've done more damage to yourself and the church or your children. And so I always try to help people figure out, what are the measurable goals? What do you want to do? Because you really have to be sensitive. I've been in churches. I pastored in the Methodist church where there were people who were affirming and people who were not. And ultimately, I stayed for that time while I pastored. And by the time I got ready to leave, the church voted to be affirming. There were some people who left, and I'm glad I stayed. But I knew that we would be able to get us to that place, and I was willing to take that journey. But that's not the case for all churches.
Yeah. That's really good. You're dropping some good nuggets of wisdom there, Pastor Josh. Thank you. We've come to the end of I tried to wrap up around an hour or so into it. So I'm going to close out with one
Sure.
last question. And I wonder if you'll just maybe share, if nothing comes to mind, that's fine. But is there a story recently in your line of work? Because we both are pastors in these sort of uniquely progressive Christian spaces, which has its own set of challenges, as all jobs do, and all ministry jobs do. So we're not unique in that, but I do think there are some interesting ways in which ministering with and to and for people who have such significant wounding around churches, it can be a heavy experience. It can be hard work. So one of the things that my wife and I, we co-pastor Sojourn, we often remind ourselves of like why we do this thing when we have like these stories of like the good fruit that comes out of the work of Sojourn. So I'm just wondering if you would end our time together by sharing what's a story recently that that reminds you of like, oh yeah, this is why I keep showing up to do this work.
Somebody just recently told me a story of during this pandemic being on lockdown and it really struggling and being hard, and they were taking care of their grandparent. The dad took care of the grandparent during the day, and at the nighttime, this particular member of our church would take care of her grandma. And everyone's so isolated and really needs and longs for relational, personal connections. And her small group that night, unfortunately, was gathering the same night she was supposed to take care of her grandma. And she was like, I really want to be with my small group. I want to spend time with them. I need to be around people. Everything is so isolating. And so she just texted and said, I can't come tonight. Like, I got to take care of my grandma. And the small group responded, bring your grandma. And so she was like, what? I can bring my grandma? She's like, they're like, absolutely. So that's what she did. She got on her Zoom call, brought her grandma, her small group just asked her grandma questions about her life and how she was doing. And after they hung up, her grandma was like, those were really nice people. And this particular member of our church just said she just cried because she realized what a unique community she was a part of, that they could make space for her and for her grandma, just basically where she was at and what she needed at that time to be able to accommodate that space. And that reminds me of why I do the work I do, because of inclusive churches that don't even, bat an eye at figuring out how they can accommodate and celebrate people wherever they are in the spectrum.
I love that. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for hanging out with me. I was going to say this afternoon, but I guess it's evening for you. Thanks for hanging out with me today during the show. Thanks for your patience and rescheduling. At the top of the show, I talked about all the disruption that my January brought. And so you graciously kept letting me reschedule this thing. But it's really good. It's really good to get to know you a bit more and to hear a bit more about your work. Thanks for sharing your story about going to Willow Creek. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. It's complicated. I know sometimes I can come out fiery with it. People, I can be fiery, be like, you should leave. But I understand it's complicated. And Josh, I really love your pastor's heart for people as they reflect on what I think is something that really deserves a lot of attention and focus and matters greatly.
Thank you.
Do you?
And can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say thank you for being an ally, because gay people lose a lot when they come out, but so do the allies. And I think that's a place of solidarity. We both know what it feels like to lose a lot, to try to be our true selves and to hold up for our convictions. So thank you for being an ally, for caring about myself and other LGBTQ people and making space for these hard conversations.
You're kind to say that. Thanks, bud. Appreciate that. Do you and Austin have a date?
October 2nd.
October 2nd. Fantastic. Yes. Precisely like 5 months from today or 6 months? What's my math?
I don't know. It's all a blur.
All right. It's all right. Well, best of wishes to you both, and good luck on your closet and managing, keeping that organized and and up to date with the latest styles. And I hope we get to hang out IRL someday, man. I'd like that.
Yes, I would love that.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye for now.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Pastor Josh, for hanging out with us today and sharing your thoughts and sharing of your story and your experiences. It is good. So great to be back with everyone here on the altar. Love being with you on these Wednesdays. I will see you next week at same time, same place, and look forward to our next guest, which I haven't booked yet, but I'm going to start booking guests now. So if you know somebody that should be on this show and that would make for a fun conversation with me, please message me and let me know that. Good to see you, Odette. Glad you made it. You said you're late, but you made it, and that's fantastic. So good to have you and everyone else. All right, that's it. That's all I've got. Y'all are good people. And I'm going to play this outro video, and we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.